2, 1. And hello everybody, welcome to Live from Lockdown, episode number 27. So we've been here for 27 weeks doing this, but you know what, it's become fun. This has become like a weekly ritual for all of us. A lot of people here. We have about 100 regular people that come, have literally not missed a single week. And so welcome to all of you guys. And for those of you who are new, welcome. Glad you could join us. Those of you watching the replay, I hope you enjoy it. There's very lively chat here. One of the nice things about being here live at 1 p.m. every Thursday is that we can join in the chat and have a little bit of community. So there's a couple of things that we do this week. In a second, we're going to be jumping into the lessons, and we're going to be learning some nice things about painting with color and light this week. This is applicable for photographers. Also, this is applicable for digital artists, designers, anybody really are going to be able to use these techniques. And let me know in the comments right now which one of those are you. Are you a photographer? Are you an illustrator, designer? Let us know right now. And before we kick off, do me a favor, hit that like button. That's the thumbs up there. And that helps the algorithm. It just kind of spreads the love for this live stream and lets people know that we're streaming live. And also, if you haven't yet subscribed, hit that subscribe button, and then you'll become part of the Cafe crew, and you'll also get the notifications so you know when we do these live streams. So what we do is we're going to jump in, we're going to do these lessons, we're going to learn some things, we're going to go and fix my photo, and what we're going to do is a special Fix My Photo this week, where I'm going to be looking at all the photos you've submitted. If you don't know what Fix My Photo is, just hang in there, you'll find out in a little bit. But we're going to be taking today's techniques that we're learning, and we're going to be using them in Fix My Photo. This stream's going to last about an hour. Then afterwards, we're going to hang out at the end. We're going to do questions and answers live, and we're going to, just kind of hang out. So just to let you guys know, and then when that time comes in the hour, I'll let you know when the lessons are officially over for those of you who need to move on. And for the rest of you just want to just kind of hang out and have a little, what we call afterglow, we can do that. So welcome to LFL episode number 27. So let's get started. We're going to be talking about painting with color and light. So here's an example here actually on the Live from Lockdown is I kind of use some of these techniques here. This is a composite obviously, and I added some flames in here, and this model was Lena. Shot her in our studio, and you can see we've got the kind of color just kind of hitting these areas and also hitting the speakers in the background, and then we've got the city that was composited in as well, and you can see a little bit of that blue light hitting the edge. So we've got different colored light, and in fact we could go into this in a moment, but what we'll do is we're going to go through and we're just going to do an example from start to finish. And then, we can kind of break down some of the different techniques and things like that. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to open up a Lightroom, just because people keep asking me, do you use Lightroom? Don't worry, we're not going to be working in Lightroom, but this is where I store my photos. This is one of my catalogs. You can see there's almost 70,000 photos in here. So this is a live catalog that I use all the time. And I'm going to change the screen here. Boom. Here we go. All right, guys, so this is as in Lightroom Classic here, and you can see, this is just some photos that I took this week. All right, so what I'm going to do now is we're just going to open this in Photoshop. So sometimes I will store my photos, as I said before, 70,000 in this particular catalog. I have 3 different catalogs that I work with, and this is just some photos I took last week. And so we're just going to start with this. So whether you're starting in Lightroom or you're starting inside of Bridge, it doesn't really matter. When we go into the Develop module here, the Develop module is the same as the adjustments in Camera Raw. So all I'm going to do here is I'm just going to crop just so I can straighten this image. And I'm just going to hit the angle here and just get that. Because sometimes in the moment you get all excited and your photos are not necessarily straight. It happens to the best of us, so don't worry. So I'm just going to straighten that. Looks great. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to crop this in a little bit tighter. So let's just crop it into about there. I'm going to hit enter. And why don't I just get rid of that little bit of sensor dust. So we're just going to grab our spot removal tool here quickly and just tap. Great. So now I'm just going to go and I'm going to open this inside of Photoshop. Looks like there's another spot down the bottom though. Let me get this first. Boom. Great. So all we need to do is to open this, just right click and choose Edit in Photoshop. I'm going to edit as a smart object inside of Photoshop. And then what that's going to do is it's going to give us the ability to, to edit that more later. Because it's a non-destructive and these Lightroom moves are going to be built in. So there we go. There's our image. Looks like it's still a little crooked. We can deal with that in the end. All right. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to double click. And this is why I open as a smart object, because this will take me into Camera Raw. And the nice thing about working here inside of Camera Raw, number one, it's the same adjustments that you have inside of Lightroom. And there's just some good tools here. It's a good place to start making just the basic global adjustments before we go in and we start doing the special things inside of Photoshop. I'm just clicking crop here because I don't feel like this has properly been straightened. And let's grab our straighten tool here and just drag across and see if I can get a better job of that. Okay, maybe that looks a little straighter. And there we go. And I'm just going to go under the adjustments here, and we're just going to do some basic adjustments. I'm not going to do a lot here. I just want to set just the overall tone. So let's increase our exposure a little bit. You can see it's a foggy morning, which is great. This is going to work well for this. I'm just going to recover highlights and shadows a little, which is going to add to that fogginess. And I'm just going to give it a little bit of black and white just to punch that contrast. Great. And I'm just going to click OK. And here we are right now inside of Photoshop. All right, so I haven't done anything really big as far as it comes to adjusting the color and tone. But let's do it right now. So what we're going to do is just create a new layer in the top. And let's just say what would happen if we had some light coming in, like maybe a beam of sunlight. So why don't I create a beam of sunlight on this new layer? So I'm going to use the polygon lasso tool. So let's go down to the lasso and we're going to try the polygon lasso tool. Now this is something I haven't tried this before, so hopefully it's going to work. And so I'm just hitting the option scroll wheel. Well, I mean, I've tried this before, but not on this particular image or for this style of image. So let me be a little more clear. So what I want to do is get some beams of light just kind of coming down. So let's just kind of add that there. Maybe I'm going to go up and that's a beam of light. So now I'm going to hit the shift key because I want to add again, and I'm going to add a second beam of light. So let's go across here and we'll just finish that, close that out. And just for grins and gigs, why don't we do one more? I'm going to start up here and just go there and enter. All right, so I've got a selection around the 3 and I want to put some kind of beam of light in there. Let's see how this works. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the adjustment layers. When I've got a selection active like I do right now, when I go into an adjustment, it's automatically going to create a mask. So why don't we go in, I'm just going to move my water bottle so I can see. And we're going to start with let's just do a levels adjustment. So I just want to brighten this up. So here we are. I'm adding this, brightening up this beam of light there. Awesome. That looks pretty good. That's kind of getting us where we want. So now we can kind of see, what's going on. So imagine these beams of light are cutting through the fog. Obviously, they don't look very realistic yet, but we will fix all of that. All right. Looks like the Enterprise is ready to beam up, says Tracy. That's funny. All right, so what we want to do is we want to soften this, and this is going to start to make this look a little more realistic. So with the mask selected, you could just go to the Properties panel. And to open a Properties panel when you're in a mask, by the way, just double click and that will open it. And we're just going to try a little feather here, and let's feather that. Now as we start to soften those edges, notice now it starts to look a little more realistic. So we can decide how much we want. Maybe that looks pretty good. And so the reason I cut this into individual ones is because I wanted to just kind of make it look like, because when the light comes through the fog or the clouds, it doesn't just come through as one beam. There's different density in the clouds and it kind of comes through broken a little bit like that. So this is not bad. I mean, this will work. There's many ways you could have done this. You could just brushed it or whatever. All right, so one of the other things we want to do here, though, is we want to adjust the color. I want to make this color a little bit warmer because the sunlight is going to be warmer than, you know, just the fog. So why don't we add another adjustment layer? And I'm going to go in here and we're going to add a hue saturation adjustment layer. So why don't we do hue saturation? We're going to click on colorize and we're going to give this a nice yellowish tone. Look at that. Beautiful. Now, maybe you guys saw the picture I posted last week. I kind of did a little bit of this on there, but this is going to be different. So the problem we have right now is this color is affecting everything. I just want to affect those areas where the beams are. Now there's a couple of different ways I could do this. I could copy this beam in here. If I hit the Alt or the Option key and I drag that, I can replace that. And notice now that we've got those adjustments there on the two individual layers. Now one of the things I feel like we need to do now that we're starting to put this color in, which we'll fix in a second, but let's cool this image off. So I'm just going to double click. That'll take us back into Camera Raw. And now we're going to pull the temperature down. We're going to cool this down. Look at that. Click OK. And notice now it's going to be a lot more dramatic. And if we look at these colors, they're kind of interesting because if we go under the window, let me open up the colors for you guys. And if we look at the color wheel, now if you go under window color, that will get you your color panel. By default, it's going to look something like this. If you click on the little menu here and we choose the color wheel, we can go in and we can see our color wheel. So one of the things that's interesting is if we look at blue and then we go right across the opposite side, we see yellow. So these are what are known as complementary colors. So these colors are actually going to complement each other. And when you're working with color, look for those kind of things. Either you want to work with colors that are very close to each other, or the ones that are opposite, which are complementary, or you can even do triadic colors where you go from here to the three corners. So, you know, if say you were starting at blue, then you would grab some green and you could put those three colors in, and this is what's known as color harmony. But we're not going to get too deep into that right now. But one of the nice things that we're in here too is, you know, we can go through and of course, you know, we can adjust these hues while we're inside the color. You know, this is where we would select our colors and that will change the foreground. Notice that as we change these, that foreground color is changing. All right, so I just wanted to show you that they're in the color. We're not where we want to be yet. We're far from it. Now there's another way that we can work with these. If you want to work with these together with the same mask, what we could do is create a layer group. And what we need to do is select both of these and hit Control G for group, and that'll put us inside a layer group. And the reason I've done this is because I want to apply just one mask to the entire group. So I don't have, you know, so then if I change something, it affects everything. So why don't we take this mask here from the hue saturation, drag it to the top, and notice now we've got this mask attached to the layer group. So this means now I can get rid of these other masks. So right now, if I look at this, well, let me invert that. There we go. So now what I've done is I've basically got rid of the masks on these two layers, and the only mask is affecting it now is on the group. See that? And it just makes it easier to manage all of these adjustments. All right, let's fix these adjustments now. Let's double click on the levels because it might be a little too bright. So let's take it back to a little bit more of a reasonable level. And let's do the same thing with the hue saturation. It's a little too saturated. Let's pull that saturation back. And see what I can do here is I can play around with it. Or of course, because it's on a group, I can also play with the opacity and we can just dial it in. So we can decide, you know, how much of this do you want there? You know, I feel like down there we've got to do a little bit more adjustment on this overall. So why don't I just apply a curves adjustment? I'm just going to go under here, under our curves. Let's grab our curves here. And let's just kind of dial this in a little bit. I want to just give this a little more contrast. There we go. And I also feel like that blue's just a little too much. So let me double click. And of course, the nice thing about working with it is that Smart Object in Camera Raw is we can go back all the time and we can tweak these. Let's click OK. There we go. That's starting to look a little bit better now. And I feel like this hue saturation is still not working. So why don't we just play around with the hue and change it till we get a color that we feel like is working better for us. And also maybe normal blend mode might not be the best. We might want to try some of these other blend modes. Well, I'm liking what overlay's doing there. It's looking quite nice. And then we can go here and we can look into the levels. Let's try some different blend modes here. Screen. Let's go into here. Maybe the soft light's looking good. All right, so we've got a question there. And that was the blend modes for the layer group. Does it always have to be passed through? Well, here's the thing about a blend mode. If it's passed through, what it does, let me put it to normal. And notice what's happening here. When we go to normal, now it's just kind of affecting, well, let me just do something, maybe make it a little bit easier to see what I'm doing here. Say I'm up there. So normal, what it does is it treats these just like a layer. If I change it to pass through, it keeps these contained within this layer group. So, so these adjustments, like for example, the hue saturation, or let me just show you. So say I've thrown a solid color here. You know, that solid color is going to be affecting everything. If I change this to normal, well, let me get it up above there. Hang on. Let me drag that above, clip it to there. And there we are in normal. And what am I doing here? Probably because that mask is active. It's making it hard for me to demonstrate this. But you'll see. Maybe what I'll do is when I open up a composite in a sec, I'll show you a better example, which is going to show this. But if you're in normal versus pass through, when you start doing a lot of things with different blend modes and things in here, it helps you contain it or share it. Okay, so let's get that. I've gone too far with that. Let me undo that. Yep. And let's go back here. Let's go back to pass through so we can see our effect. Nice. All right, so what we want to do, what I really want to show you guys is when we start to paint in here. Let's start to do this. So we've got these boats and we want to kind of affect these edges of these boats. So now we've got some beams of light, but the light is not changing on these boats themselves, right? So what we want to do is let's go here, we'll create maybe a hue saturation adjustment. And we're going to hit colorize. And I need that out of the group. I apologize. Let me take that to the very top. Great. Let's give it this color. All right, great. And I'm going to invert the mask. Control I. So now we've hidden the mask. So what we want to do now is that we want to paint with that adjustment onto these boats. Now, of course, we can do it with the group as well. You know, if we go here, we have that option to do it there. So why don't we start with this, even though it's kind of already hitting there, and then we'll use this to enhance it. So what happens now is if I select my brush and I paint with white, now I can paint this adjustment. Let me get this working right. Let's take it here. So if I was to paint with that brush, see how we can paint that effect there? And so that's going to paint the effect of everything. Let me turn this all the way up to 100 just to make it stronger. Turn the flow up just so you guys can see. So say I wanted to paint some light here, I could. See how you're just kind of spreading that light? So I'm going to do two things. One, I'm going to start to put a little bit of light on the bottom of the water where it's starting to hit. So we're on that mask with the brush selected, with white selected for the brush, and we'll turn that smoothing all the way down. That smoothing is good when you're doing illustration, but not when you're doing retouching. Let's turn our flow down a little bit to around about 16. And now I'm just going to gently paint. See what I'm doing is I'm letting some of this kind of spread out a little bit. So instead of just the beams hitting now, see what it's doing is it's starting to spread and just kind of hit there. I think that flow is still too high. Let me undo that. And we're going to bring that flow down lower. There we go. And let me just make sure my pen pressure is set right. So I'm going to set my, if you're using a Wacom pen, turn on transfer, and I want that opacity to be set to pen pressure. And by the way, if you get this and these strokes are not smooth, just change brush tip shape, just reduce that spacing, and that'll get you a nice smooth. All right, great. So we'll try this a little more. There we go. Now we're getting a bit of a better. So I'm just kind of spreading this a little bit now. See what I'm doing? Just trying to make it look like a little more natural. I'm even going to go in between these beams so they're not solid black. There we go. See how that's starting to look a lot more realistic. And then we can start to add that. And the nice thing is we can go in here, play around with that opacity, drop that down. If we don't like so much of the color, we can reduce that hue, see that, and then just slowly bring that in a little bit. There's our levels there. And that's set to the soft light, of course. So, you know, we can just, if you want to make that stronger, set it to something like a hard light. And let's give this a little more color. So what I'm doing is I'm just kind of dialing these in a little bit. It's not bad. Let's double click on that hue saturation. Let's give it a little more saturation. Just kind of trying to get it where you want it. And you could spend forever just kind of doing that. Now let's go to the top layer, and I'm going to show you how we can start to paint this in now. Glenn Davey, do you ever use Adobe Color in Photoshop? You mean under the window extensions? Is that even in there still? I don't even know if it's even part of Photoshop anymore, is it? I have used it in the past, but not a ton, to be honest, which is clearly obvious because I didn't know where it was. So now we could go in here and we could start to paint on here. That's a little too much. Let me undo this. So that's the flow there is set low. Let me make sure that my opacity is working, and also let's make a soft edge brush. There we go. Make sure we're painting there, and you know, we can start to paint in some edges. And then all I'm doing is I'm just kind of painting in the edges here where this light might be hitting. Now you can use selection tools to help you, and this would help you a lot. So let's go here, use the object selection tool, and see how that gets those edges of the boat. And of course, you know, you would go in and just kind of refine these a little bit. I'm not going to bother just for the sake of time right now. And I'm just going to start to paint in, like maybe this back here is getting the color. Actually, probably wouldn't. It would be more the surfaces facing that light. Up here, that part there would be getting a little bit of that. And right now it's too dense as far as the yellow, but it doesn't matter. We can fix that. Fix that in a minute. So, you know, all I'm doing is I'm just kind of painting like that. And why don't we use some selections? Now, normally I would take a lot of time and I would select this. I might use a pen tool or whatever, or object selection, lasso, different tools to get good selections in here. In fact, why don't I just do one so you guys can see? Let me use a pen tool. So if I wanted to get this really good, I would go here. I would grab that pen tool, drag it across. And by the way, I have a tutorial on how to use the pen tool. It's at photoshopcafe.com, and also I've got one here on the YouTube channel. Just search pen tool, and I've got basics of the pen tool. So all I really want is just these edges. And one of the things that you might have noticed is mine is red. They've actually, one of the nice things they've done here is they've given us the ability to change that. So when we're in the pen tool, we can go in here and we can change the color. So yours might be the cyan by default, but we can change that now. And that's a newer thing that's been added in Photoshop 2020. All right, so that's just going to give me an edge there. And then that'll be, you know, close enough. So let me go to the path, and I'm just going to control click on that path. That gives me a selection. I can have the brush here, and I can start to paint. And if I want to create a nice rim on that edge, I just run along the edge like that. And if I go too far, which I have, I've gone way too far, I can just hit the X key and I can just paint with black now and just kind of feather that up to the edge. Let's make this bigger. And in a second, we're going to do this on some of you guys' photos, and I think you're going to see how these techniques are really going to come alive with some of those photos. All right, so let me just hit Control D, and we can kind of see what we're doing here. Now, obviously, that's not looking great, but this is why we can go in here, double-click, and that's the nice thing about these adjustment layers. They're non-destructive, so watch these edges now. If I feel like, no, it's too much color, I can reduce that saturation. I can make it brighter. And see what I'm doing there is I'm getting these highlights in there. So let's look at this before and after, and notice how these highlights are just kind of starting to make these edges just kind of pop. So this is a kind of, just basically how the techniques work, and you can start to apply that to some of the different images. So let me go there, and I'm not going to finish this. I just wanted to just kind of use this as just to kind of show you the techniques. So if we kind of start there, and then we go here, see how we're starting to paint in some of that light. Now this is a little strong, just for the sake of examples, I might come in and drop these down a little bit. And a nice thing about using opacity is that we can just take this opacity down and just dial it in to a more realistic level. I don't like what I did on the edge of that boat, but this one's looking a little bit better. Once again, double click and let's fix it. So maybe we want a little more color, a little less brightness, less color. See how everything is adjustable after the fact. So, we can go in and we can do that, play around with the opacity, make things a little less obvious. And now if we look at, before and after, we can start to dial these in and start to make certain parts of these images pop. So now instead of this just being a flat photo, now we're kind of looking at this, and the attention now is starting to come on some of these boats here on this side. Before you didn't know what the subject was. Now it's like, okay, these two boats are the important part of the subject. And so, as Bruce says there, don't forget to smash that like button. If you're getting some value out of this, hit that like button as the thumbs up. And just kind of helps the algorithm with our live streaming to let people know that we are live streaming. And also subscribe if you haven't subscribed. All right, guys. So now we're going to do this. We're going to move into a different section where I'm going to start to apply these techniques we just learned. We're going to actually use them on real photos, which are your guys' photos. So it's time for Fix My Photo. Roll the intro. And hello, and welcome to Fix My Photo. This is where we take the photographs that you guys have submitted, and this week we're going to be applying our effects to it. So these are lots of photos. And I did say before, guys, that if I don't use it that week, it doesn't mean that it's going to disappear. So these are all the photos that we've had submitted so far for Fix My Photo. And if you want to see them inside all the folders, I'm actually in Bridge here. There's the different weeks. And if you see this little arrow at the end, if you click on here and say show items from subfolders, this will show you all the items from, actually I'll show you that in a sec. I'm getting ahead of myself, and I'll show you guys the screen. But first of all, if you want to have your photos included in Fix My Photo, what you want to do is you want to upload them to fixmyphoto.net. Use a RAW file or a JPEG, which is at least 2,000 pixels. I prefer, if it's unedited, put your name in the file name, and a maximum of 3 submissions each week for each person. So these are the photos that you guys have submitted, and let me just show you that again because I didn't have this on the screen. So these are the individual weeks, and we're looking at these in Bridge. Click the little arrow, and it says show items from subfolders, and this is how we can view all the photos from all those weeks, from all those subfolders. So here we go, guys. And these are all the photos that you guys have submitted. And as I said a second ago, if I don't use them that week, it doesn't mean that they're going to disappear into an abyss. Right now, we're pulling up all the photos, and let's see. We're going to apply today's techniques to some of these photos. So why don't we start with Bonnie's photo? That looks interesting. So we've got that one, and I see she's added a raw file there, which is nice. And so we're going to open that one. Let's have a look at a different one. Or is that Bonnie's as well? Okay, that's nice. Let's see, what do we got? Looking for a nice outdoor photo that we could add some kind of lighting to. And we used that one from Henry already. What have we got? These are all the photos. You can see your guys' names in there. And just remember, if you want your photos to be included, upload them, fixmyphoto.net. You can do it anytime throughout this week. And then they'll be in here ready for next week. Okay, there's a good example. I like that one. Looks nice. And it's from Sandy Carney. And let's see what else we've got here. I don't know if we're going to get to... We're obviously not going to get to use them all. There's one from Tom. We already used that, but that could be useful for this technique. I'm just going to open up a few. And let's have a look. What else we got here? Maybe we can do something with one of these from Surendra. All right, so let's open these. So we're going to choose right-click, Open in Photoshop. But we do want these to open in Camera Raw. So let's choose that, Open in Camera Raw, and then we can just kind of start here. All right, so why don't we go in and obviously we've got to do a little adjusting here. So we're just going to rotate this. And that's how you rotate in Camera Raw, by the way. Just go to the crop tool and then choose rotate there. And that is going to rotate us. Looks good. And let's go here, aspect ratio, original. There we go. We don't want to crop the top of that photo off. And we might straighten it a little bit. All right, great. So we've got that's a good starting one. We've got Sandy's here, looks good. That one there. Oh, this might, okay, 14%. Let's see where we're at to fit in view. All right, we might be able to do something like this. This would be illegal in the US, by the way. You're not allowed to photograph on train tracks. It's actually a felony. I don't know if you guys knew that. And then we're just going to choose open. And so we're going to open these inside of Photoshop. All right, here we go. So why don't we start with, let's start with Bonnie. And let's do something interesting with this. Maybe let's create a new layer here. And I'm going to grab a gradient. So we're just going to give it some basic color. So choose the gradient tool. And then with the gradient, we're going to be using our foreground to transparent option. You'll see that under basics. So we're clicking here. And so the foreground color is going to blend in. And so why don't we change our foreground color from black to something that we can use, like a nice, maybe a little bit more orange. There we go. Obviously, it's going to be too much, and we'll dial it back in a sec. But what I want to do is just give it a little bit of light. So let's assume some light's coming in here. We could try some different blend modes here. Soft light's looking pretty good. Pen light can work quite well for this too, so it almost looks like a flare. In fact, why don't we try that? We're going to drop that down. So what we're doing here is just going from that scene to something with a little bit of light coming down. So maybe we're starting to get a little bit of flare here, and we're getting into, maybe it's, you know, getting closer to a sunset kind of time. So we're adding that little color there. And then we're going to apply that on here. So that's great. So why don't we go in, and what we're going to do is create an adjustment layer. So let's go to a curves adjustment layer. So this time we're going to create a curve, and I see a question here. Do I ever use capture to make LUTs? It's a great way to create LUTs. I should, and it's one of the things I've been meaning to do more of. And honestly, no, I haven't a lot, no. All right, so we're going to go in here, and I want to make this more yellow. Obviously, there's no yellow, so we're going to choose blue, which is the opposite of yellow on the color wheel, as you guys saw before. And if we wind back, we can start to get a little bit of yellow. See that? Great. And now I'm going to go to RGB, and I'm going to brighten this up. So we're going to go bright. Okay, so there's our curves. We're not going to use all of this, obviously. But what we're going to do is just use this as the painting color. Let me hide this so we can see this is what we got before and after. So what we want to do is we want to paint with this adjustment. And this is enabling us to paint with both light and color where we want it. So what we want to do now is we want to hide it. Control I. That hides everything. And now where we choose to paint with white is going to bring our effect in. So let's go ahead and create a brush, or grab a brush. Select our brush here. Let's make sure it's a soft edge. Could be a hard edge too, you know, for rim light. It doesn't really matter. In fact, this is maybe a little too soft. Let's bring it a little bit in there. Great. And I want to set white as the foreground color because black on a layer mask, what it does is it hides the contents of that layer mask. When we paint with white on there, this enables the, wherever we're painting, it will show this adjustment right there. Great. So why don't we just start with just a little bit here. And I did a lesson recently where I showed the difference between opacity and flow. And it seems better to keep your opacity high and keep your flow low rather than going the other way. And let me just click here on the brush settings, make sure we've got pen pressure set for opacity and not for size. Because if you've got it turned on in shape dynamics, this can be a little annoying sometimes. Because when it does that, when you're trying to paint soft, it also makes the line thinner. So, yeah, depending on how you want to work. Okay, so why don't we paint for a little bit of white here. And we know our light's coming from this side. So why don't we just zoom in a little bit. And we're going to be hitting these surfaces. And don't worry about if the colors are too much or everything's too much, because we can tweak all this later. In fact, this is too much, but we can see what we're doing. So we're just kind of painting that light on here. We'll adjust it in a minute. And so these surfaces that are going to be facing the light are going to be receiving some of this. The surfaces that are not going to receive it, obviously. Okay, so let's go a little bit thicker here. So I'm going to go darker on these areas that are closer. And I've gone over a little bit, but we can fix that. All we need to do is just hit the X key, and then we just paint with black. And then we can just go in there and just clean that up. Now, generally speaking, when you do that, I would use a hard edge brush to go in and do the cleanup work. So that gives us the soft edge going into our object, so it kind of feathers into our object, and then the hard edge will enable us to just kind of clean it up. Okay, so let's go here, and we'll hit the X key. And by the way, I'm just hitting the Control Option, and that enables me to drag up and down and change the hardness, left and right to change the size. If you're on Windows, that would be Alt, right drag, I believe. Okay, so I'm just going to add a little bit facing that direction. So what we're doing is we're just hitting these surfaces that are facing towards the sun. And what I'm going to do is you can kind of see how I would do that precisely, but I'm going to zoom out a little bit just so we can quickly do it so you can kind of see. Now remember, I would be zoomed in nice and close, getting these nice and exact, like I showed you guys on this rock. But in this case here, we're just going to go this way. And even though there's shadow there, we're overriding that shadow now. We're going to paint that in. And you can actually completely remap your shadows and highlights in photos by doing these kind of techniques. All right. You know, and I would do those areas. Okay, so why don't we go in now? We're going to add that light. So now that's hitting, and let's adjust these curves. Double click and see how we can change that brightness. I think the brightness should be a little more. The color's a little too much, so let's go into blue. And let's bring that back. Let's hide that just so we can see. So we want to warm it up a little bit, but maybe not too much. And let's go into the reds, maybe give it a little more red too. There we go. So that gives it a little bit of an orange kind of a feel there with that yellow and red. And we can take it to there. So if we look at this, you know, before it's flat, afterwards now it's starting to give that light. And we could do that, maybe drop that pin light down a little bit, so it's just a little less. And see what we're doing here is we're going from that, And now we're starting to do that. So feel free, to adjust the colors however you want, the brightness however you want. Let's move on to another example and see where we go. Let me just hide this. And if you guys get any questions, just go ahead and drop those questions. So Lynn is saying, I think this is cool, but it helps to have an artist's eye. This is where she struggles. Okay, so one of the things you might want to do is, you can develop that eye. Just so you guys know, no one was born with an artist's eye. Yes, some people do have a different ability to appreciate certain things naturally, but all of these things can be learned. And one of the things you might do is just do a reference. I have no idea what I'm looking at here, but let's look for, say, sunlight. I'm in Google. I'm searching sunlight right now. And then there's all kind of images. And then we can look here and we can see, okay, how does sunlight... This is what you do, is you study. And, as you do this more in time, you learn these things. So right now I'm going to show you... I think this is going to be advantageous to kind of show you how to analyze photos and look and see how, really what it is you need to learn how to see. Everyone can see, but you don't know what you're looking at. Let me give you an example. If I was to ask you, what color is chrome? What would you guys say? Answer, drop an answer there into the question, what color is chrome? Now, I'm going to imagine that some people are going to say silver. It hasn't come up yet, but that'll be there soon. Of course, we've got a pretty smart group, so I know some people are going to get this right. But if you look at chrome, it seems like it's silver, right? When you just kind of look at it, yep, everyone's saying silver. There we go. And is it really? Is chrome really silver? Why do you think it's silver? Because sometimes it's reflecting the environment. And sometimes your environment is that blue sky, which can make it look silver. But if you actually really look deeply into that chrome, you'll notice it's not silver. You'll see all kinds of colors. But what's happening is you're just observing and you're not seeing. So when you casually observe something, it seems one way. But then when you really start to look at it closely, you'll notice there's other colors you didn't notice before. You'll start to see things in texture. And this is how you learn. So say, for example, this image here, if we look at this, we know we've got the sunlight coming down. And look at this, we've got this backglow. So that means when something's backlit, that makes things glow. Look at the hair, see that? We've got the rim light hitting the face. So, if I click on this and we look at it closer up, and these are just images we just pulled up randomly. Look at these people in the sunlight. So study sunlight. What does it do? Oh, look, we get this bokeh in the background where things go out of focus. We get these hot spots, things start to blow out. We get the rim light. What color is that light? You want to start to look at these kinds of things. And, the shadow and the areas of occlusion, or the areas that are not getting the light. So these are things that if you start to look at this and look at the color, see how the color changes, okay? So, so when I applied to that rock, did it look too yellow? Well, maybe it did, but look at this. In sunlight, things really do go crazy yellow. So this is where, you can look at this. Start to look at this. Okay, the sun is hitting here. What area is it receiving sunlight? Why is there no sunlight down on here? Why is this dark? And that's because, these hills are shading the light. So it's creating shadow from these hills, and that light is not able to get in that valley. So just start to look at the real world. And then when you start to look at the real world, then you can start to apply these things in your image, in your editing. So let's go here. Why don't I just apply, what we'll do here is let's just do a hue saturation adjustment. So I'm going to go in here, I'm going to create hue saturation. And I love it when we get these questions. This is one of the things I love about Live from Lockdown. Because, in my normal, like a training course, I wouldn't necessarily be able to go and answer these questions like this, but in this case we can. Someone wants to know about textures. We can definitely look at textures. Okay, so let me give you the hint about textures. If you look at this photograph, notice. Let me demonstrate. So if you look at something And guys, look into I don't know how I'm going to show this, maybe just with the photo, but if you look at, take light, and if you get, like I've got on my phone here, I think you can see that. Do I have anything with texture that's curved? I don't know. Maybe something like this. Maybe this will show. I don't know if it'll show or not. But if you look at this, and I put this light directly on it, see how it looks flat? If I put the light behind it, it looks flat. But when I rake the light across, can you guys see that? As that light starts to rake across something, you can see more texture. It's probably too bright. But, so texture is not applied evenly. I'm trying to turn my flashlight off on the phone. Let me get that off. Hey Siri, flashlight off. There we go. That works. Oh, thanks. She's always proud of herself whenever she does something. All right, so we're here. So if you look at this, you know, the texture is going to be more enhanced where you've got the cross light versus a flat light. When something hits front on, when that light hits front on, it's flat. So if I turn my face, you see more texture. You know, probably not the best lighting environment, but you know, that's just something to teach there. All right, so let's go ahead though. We're going to do a hue saturation. So I'm just going to show you. So let's colorize this. And Tom, thank you once again for letting us use this beautiful image of yours. Actually, I'm not going to colorize it. Let's just try. Well, let's see. Let's increase that saturation, brightness. So we're just trying to enhance this light a little bit. Okay, let's hit colorize. Just trying to get something here, right? And this will probably work for more of like a rim light kind of effect. All right, so we've got that. Let's get rid of everything, Control I. And remember when we looked at that sunlight and you saw that rim light. So what you would normally do is just make some kind of a selection. Let me do that right now. So I'm just going to grab a quick selection tool and hopefully it does a good job. Yeah, it's not bad. This is good. Let me undo that and hit the Alt or the Option key. Okay, so you know, I'm not going to take a ton of time, but see what we're doing here is we're selecting those edges, and I'm going to hit Command Shift I, so that's inverting. So now we can paint inside here, and it's going to help us protect those edges. This is terrible selection, but you guys will get the idea. So if we grab a brush, let's make this brush smaller and maybe a little harder. And what we want to do is we want to paint with white around the edge here. Maybe a little bit bigger. There we go. And so now if I go on this edge, notice what I'm doing. I'm painting this rim on that edge. And if you guys remember on that photo, what were we doing? We were looking at that reference, remember? And we're just going around here a little bit. Let's go here. And we're just kind of hitting this rim. Just going there. And let's just hit Control D. And let's double click on here. And now we can increase this lightness maybe. Or we can play around with the blending mode. That looks good. Yeah, maybe even the screen mode looks good. So now if I turn this on and off, see what we've done? We've applied that rim light there. So, you know, this is how we can make things pop. This is how we can add that light. And once again, you know, as I said before, look at real world examples, look at the photos and see that. Now, of course, you know, we could go and we could apply another layer and start to bathe this in light. Why don't we do this? We'll just do a regular dodge and burn this time. We'll just throw this into overlay mode. And let's get that selection back. So let's choose select and reselect. We'll get that last selection back. And let me just hit the D key, hit X, and now I'm just going to do regular dodge and burn. So all I'm done right now is I've just selected a brush. I've set the foreground to white, and let's make this brush soft all the way to the left. So what we've got is a brush, a regular soft brush, set to white, opacity 100, and let's set this flow to 5. Now, if you hold down the Shift key and tap the number keys, you can adjust the flow. If you tap the number keys, it adjusts opacity. All right, so what I'm doing now is I'm going to add more light. And I'm just going to paint this in. You know, it's obviously going quite hard. We'll play around with the blending modes and opacity later, but now I'm extending that light. See what we're doing? Extending that light into different areas, and maybe you might want to hit these feathers here. And once again, you know, you can play around with the difference between the hard edges and soft edges. The soft edges are going to be nice for letting that light just kind of hit these areas. The harder edges are going to be nice for creating that rim light. So let me just hit Control D. And if we look at this before and after, see what we're doing? Now we're starting to change the lighting. This is probably a little much. Let's take this down and just make it a little more subtle. But see what we're doing there? Before and after. That's how we work with the rim light and different things like that. All right. And this is unusual for the chats to be so quiet. I think people are listening. That's probably why it's so quiet there only. All right. So let's move on to another image there. So let me know, guys, is this helpful? So what I'm trying to do here is really ingrain these principles more than just saying, hey, here's some pictures, let me make them look good. I'm really trying to get these principles to you guys so that you can really understand it, and you know, you can start to apply this yourself to your own images. Why don't we go here? I have no idea what I'm going to do with this photo. It's kind of a strange crop, but that's fine. Why don't I just recrop it? And are you here? Let us know. And I don't know, let's just recrop this and see, is this something that we're able to do something with? It's not the highest quality photo, but this is fine. All right, so I do something different. What I'm going to do is I'm going to do some strong colors here, you know, when we're talking about using these different colors. So we're going to create a layer on top. Let's grab our gradient, and we're going to apply a yellow, orange on one side. So we're just going to go boom, across here. And then the other side, we're going to apply a blue tone using those complementary colors. And we're going to go here. Great. Now what we want to do is just play around with these blend modes, is find something that looks good. The screen looks nice for that blue. Let's drop it down, make it a little more subtle. And here with yellow, let's see what looks good for this. Maybe screen, or screen looks good for that one too. Why don't we do screen on both of these? Drop that down a little bit. Bunny has a question. When you save all these layers as a PSD after opening as a smart object, it saves... yeah, if you save all of these into a smart object and you save the document, those will be retained, and you can double click the smart object anytime to open it. All right, so we've got, you know, some different color we're just kind of applying in there. And then, you know, we could do the same thing with the shadows and highlights. Although what I want to do is something different. Let me do something different here. I'm going to go into the dark in here for the blues. And you know, this is really probably not the best image for what I'm trying to show. Maybe I'll find a better image. Let me find a better image for what I'm trying to show, guys. I'm sorry, you know, I wanted to use this picture, but what I want to do is change the color of the shadows as well. So we'll just do this separately on this image. So I'm going to create a new layer. And what I want to do is I want to grab the shadows. So there's a way to select the shadows. If we choose select and we choose color range, under color range, we have the option here to change these from highlights, midtones, and shadows. Let's choose the shadows and take the fuzziness to nothing, and the range will determine how much gets selected. So if we go here, notice those will be selected. We go all the way. Let me change this to an image. There we go. We can see better. So what we want to do is take this range, so we're just getting on the left here these areas of shadow. See that? We're getting those shadows, and let's increase the fuzziness, and that'll just kind of create a smoother edge, a smoother transition. If we don't use that fuzziness, it's going to become a very, very hard edge. Okay, so let's click OK. And now we've selected these. What I'm going to do is I'm going to fill these, or I'm just going to create, why don't we create an adjustment layer, a solid color. And we're going to use a cooler color. So sometimes in the shadows, it's a cooler color than what you're going to get in your highlights. So let's just see what happens if we do this. So we've got it in there, and let's change normal. We could go to hue, or we could go to color. Does hue do anything? Let's have a look. A little bit. Yeah, the hues are actually working quite well. So notice how these shadow areas are now starting to become more blue. So we could do hue, or if we wanted, we could use the color. The color is going to obviously be much stronger, and it's going to affect just the color and not that hue. So let's just tweak that in. So what we've done now is we're putting these blues into the shadows. It's subtle. But see what's happening there? So now we're putting the blues into the shadows, and let's put the warmer color into the highlights. So this is a different technique. So what we're going to do, once again, we're going to choose to select that bottom layer. We're going to choose to choose color range. We're going to use the highlights now. And let's take if we go here, we're going to get a lot selected, or this area, we're just getting our brightest areas. See, these white areas are the areas that are going to be selected. And we're looking at, okay, these are the brighter areas here. And our fuzziness will blend them so they're not so harsh transitions. And let's take it to about there. All right, so these are these areas. And why don't we create another adjustment? Solid color. This time we're going to do a warmer color. If you want it less saturated, just bring that over. And see what we're doing there? Now we're bringing that in. Obviously it's too much. Here we can change the blending mode. Something like well, let's have a look at the soft light maybe. Soft light, hard light. Let's see if the soft light's enough. Before and after. Okay, that's going to do it. So if we look at this before and then after, see what we've done is we've started to put some of the different color into the highlights and in the shadows. And now if we want, we can go in here and we could paint these in. So if there were certain areas that you wanted to just kind of spread these in, if I control click, well actually if I option click, we can see there's the mask. So if there was areas here that you wanted to apply this, and let's make it a little stronger just so we can see, there's a hard light. We just paint with white now. Grab that brush, and maybe we want to hit this area here. We just paint in here. Don't worry, we'll fix all of this. And what I'm doing is I'm just saying I want this light to really just kind of come in and hit this area. So we've got this beautiful sunlight just kind of hitting now. Obviously it's too much at the moment. That's okay. We'll tweak that later. And where else do you want that to be hitting? We could have little bits of that kind of seeping through. Obviously at the top of the roof here. We could be hitting some of these trees or not. Could be hitting that edge. And so what we're doing is just think of this as water. If you don't understand necessarily how that works, think of it as water. Imagine you've got these surfaces and you're throwing water at it. All those surfaces that are facing you, the areas that are going to get wet, are going to be the areas where the light is going to hit. The areas that are going to stay dry are where the shadows are going to hit. So here we go. So we've got that. We can try some different, blending modes. Maybe the soft light looks better, or even overlay. We can reduce the opacity to 0 and just start to bring it in a little bit. So now we're just giving a little bit of sunlight. 56%. Look at that. See, it's a little more believable. Now we've got sunlight starting to hit some of these surfaces. Now it's a warmer kind of a feel. And let's go to these shadows. Let's crank this up again so we can see, maybe the color. Maybe color's not the best. You know, we can try different options here. Darken, multiply. Let's try some of these. Maybe hard light is looking good if we drop it down a little bit in opacity. And just dial it in. Yeah, that's kind of nice. And now we could go in here and we could paint with white. And this will add some of these shadows. Why is white adding shadows? Because remember, a layer mask, white enables it to show. So let's paint here. And what I'll do is I'll just go to a different blending mode right now, just to make it obvious what we're painting so you can see. So we're painting some of this shadow in now. See what I'm doing is I'm spreading it out. And now these shadow areas, these are the areas that are going to be shaded from this building. Maybe that part there. Actually, that's not going to look good. Let's go back here. So these areas here are going to be in shade. Maybe this whole thing's in shade here. You might even get some of this bank here. Maybe some of this bank is now going to go into that shade area. See what we're doing? And definitely in some of those areas in there. All right, so now if we go in and we adjust this, let's change this to a different blend mode. That's turned all the way up. Let's go and look at this. Different blend modes. You know, we could do that for color, or let's go down here, see what looks good. I think the soft light might even work to be a little bit more subtle. Take it all the way down, and now we just dial that up a little bit. So if we look at this, maybe even reduce the opacity of that. So there we were before, and there we are afterwards. And so what I've done is I've colored those shadows, but now we're also able to paint those highlights and shadows in where we want, and it can really change the way this looks. Let me just go too far so you can see very easily, you know, what's going on. So that's, you know, a little, obviously too much, and then let's just undo it again to sound a little bit more subtle. So basically what you would do is you would apply the effects that you want, and then you just kind of, you know, paint them in, and then adjust them with opacity and different things like that. So I'm definitely open, guys, for some questions and stuff now. But what we're going to do is we're going to end the stream for those of you who are just wanted to follow these instructions, and then right after that we're going to do questions and answers and hang out. So so I hope you enjoyed this, and do me a favor, guys. Hit that subscribe button. If you haven't subscribed to us, hit that like button, and let us know if you like this. And I've got a little overlay for that.